Hi, this is Yingge from Art of the Brush. Today, I'm delighted to share you with a very unique process that is to grind your own ink with inkstone and ink stick. I will briefly talk about the tools and materials you need and how to grind the ink, what's a process and what's a method. And at the very end, of course, to clean up and to store the materials. So yes, to grind your own ink requires more time and patience. However, the process and experience and the effect of the ink is rewarding. I still can remember the first time I grind my own ink. The fragrance from the ink, the fresh ink, the motion, and the space that opening up to the process is beautiful. It's another whole world of art in motion. By saying all that, look, I'm dressing up all black just in case any accident. So let's dive in. Let's look at the materials that we'll be using for grinding your own ink. You already guessed it. Yes, so we don't need much to grind our own ink. So mainly the two things we need. The one is an inkstone, another is an ink stick. You will find in the market that there are different materials for inkstone. It can be ceramic, stone, rock, or even plastic. So here I'm introducing the inkstones are made from particular stones for grinding ink. I will recommend for using stones because it lasts longer and give you a fine and smooth surface to work with. So there are many different types of stones we can use for grinding inkstones. And each of them have different colors, and some of them even have patterns and have different feelings. So one inkstone can cost very dear price. Some people even collect inkstones just because they love the design and the value included in the stone. To have the proper material and the surface that you use for grinding ink, if they look pretty, even better, but it doesn't need to be very expensive. The second thing to consider when you choose the inkstone is the size of the stone. So when you are choosing a stone, you can check the dimension of the stone, the height, the width, and the depth. I will prefer inkstones with some weight, so when you are grinding them, you will feel the stability and the solidity of the inkstone, which is very nice. So the size is not as big as better or the smaller is better. There are stones as big as a table, and there are inkstones and even smaller. So the purpose is to suit what your painting need. For example, this inkstone I use daily for my practice or painting because I only need that much ink, the amount, and this is sufficient. For a bigger inkstone, you have a bigger surface, so once you are grinding the ink, you will quickly collect amount of ink that you can use for more painting or calligraphy. And if you want to grind ink in one go, you can use the bigger ink and collect the ink in a container you can use for other days. Then another thing to consider is the shape of the inkstone. You can see some of them has a rounder shape, some of them has a long or narrow shape. And this will affect how we grind the ink, which I will talk about later. Okay, now the next exciting thing is ink stick. There are many different types of ink stick. However, aside from their design, whether they're pretty or not, in general, there are two types of ink stick. One is made with pine shoot, another type is made with oil shoot. So this little block here it takes a long time and process and care to create this. So, for example, if this is a pine shoot ink stick, people have to collect the pine branches and slowly burn it and put something on the top to collect the smoke. That takes days and even longer. And after pine shoot being collected, there are also glue being added and then other things being added together and mix and settle and mix through a long process. And finally, after it dried, we will get this ink stick, this precious ink stick. For example, this one is a pine shoot ink stick, and this one is an oil shoot ink stick. And this oil shoot ink stick is made from burned oil smoke, such as seed oil. There are different designs, there are different size, and this one has a round side because this one is rolled, hand rolled, and the others like squares, are typically made in mold. So what's the difference between the pine shoot ink stick and the oil shoot ink stick? So when we choose ink stick, it depends on your preference and the type of painting. For pine shoot ink stick, it produces this fine and smooth grind ink and with a hint of blue, which is very nice to paint topics such as landscape painting. Once you finish, the painting gives you a mystic and magic bluish feeling. And for oil shoot ink stick, because it's created from smoke of seed oil, it has this black shiny effect, which is lovely when you are doing calligraphy. So pine shoot ink is matte finish, and oil shoot ink has this shiny effect. However, when to use it and for what topic is really personal. Some people prefer to use the oil shoot ink for painting, for example, birds and flowers that give you this black and shiny effect. Okay, now let's look at how to grind ink and the process grinding your own ink. The surface for grinding ink, it can be a desk that I'm using for painting. Here, I like to put a piece of paper on the surface, just in case. So the first mistake I made when I started to grind my own ink was to grind the ink straight away on a brand new inkstone. When the inkstone was made and finished, typically it was applied with a layer of wax or oil to protect the surface because they want to know when the ink will be used again. When we are first time using the inkstone, there is a process called prepare the inkstone. In Chinese, it's called 开验. Now I will show you what it looks like for a brand new inkstone. So for example, I have this inkstone, and when I first open it, you can see it's wrapped in a bag, and here is a ribbon will help you to take the inkstone because it has some weight. And now we can put the box to the side. So this layer is to help the ink, the oil or the wax to keep wet. As you can see, here are some, still have some marks. So if we grind the ink straight away on this surface, what you will find is it's very smooth and slippery. So here I will share with you two methods of preparing your inkstone. The first one is to use a sandpaper. To choose a sandpaper that is about 400 grit or 600 grit. The reason is if the grit is too fine, it actually will affect the speed when we are grinding the ink. and then we will give a few drops of water on the stone. So just use the weight of our hand to gently press down and make circles. So be aware that we only sand the area where we use to grind ink. And also don't forget the corners around the edge. So after sand the inkstone for about 2 minutes, you will start to see some grayish mushy white color, and that means it's working. And the second method is, yes, a soft toothbrush and toothpaste will do. So simply apply some toothpaste on the surface and rub it around this earth area, and then rinse and wipe it away. So first, let's look at the inkstone. So for inkstone, this area, there are 2 parts. So the part has a flat surface, we call it the earth, which is the part we use to grind the ink. And the part that is lower is called the sea. So this is the area we will collect the ink that has ground from the earth. They stayed here for use. So the first step to grind ink is to add water. So the first few drops doesn't have to be very much. Typically 2 to 3 drops is enough to add some fresh water. So we hold our ink stick upright. If you have time, you can leave your ink stick at the side, as the one side is already moistured. So we'll keep it for a minute while you prepare other things to let it to soften. This process, we call it 醒墨. It's like waking up, to give it time to wake up, to soften the surface. However, try not to leave your ink stick straight away in the water on the ink stick, as later you may find it's very hard to lift up as they are sticking together. If you're in a hurry, don't worry about this. You can grind your ink straight away on the earth by moving in a circular movement. So the speed should be relatively slow, and use the smooth, the even movement. Be consistent. As you can see now, the ink has already mixed with water. And this is one way to test how fast the ink stick can grind the ink. If you have grind the ink for 30 seconds, however, the ink and the water still are separate, that means you may need to sand your inkstone, or your ink stick has too much glue. So the method I use is to start with the clockwise direction first. By holding our ink stick upright, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's about 1 in-breath and out-breath. In, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 20 times for clockwise direction. And then we change anti-clockwise for another 20 cycles, or 20 cycles of breathe. In and out. When we're in a hurry, or when we are grinding the ink too fast, you will see there are bubbles. You will see there are bubbles on the surface. In Chinese, we call it 热墨, literally means hot ink. Because of speed and friction, the ink getting hot and irritated. So when we are grinding ink, trying to use a smooth speed. And if you can, try to use each corner of the earth, of the surface. This is also allow you to have more chance to grind the ink with each turn, each circle. How to know if the ink is ready? So typically when you are grinding at the end, you will see when your stick gliding by, there is an open space. The ink takes time to come back together to fill up that gap. That means the ink starts to get dense, and because of the glue inside, it has a density, so it doesn't move like a pure liquid. It starts to have some quality. And that means the first grind ink is ready. To collect the ink, I will tilt my inkstone to the C side and use one side of the ink stick, just helping it to push the ink to the C area to collect all the ink together. Okay, and that's the first few drops of black ink. Another advantage of grinding on ink is you can control how dense the ink is. And this time, we only add 1 to 2 drops of water. As this is a repeat process, we don't have to grind too long. For example, if you only want some light ink, you can only do 5 times on one side, 5 times on the other side. If you want more quantity, dense ink, you can repeat by 10 times on one side and 10 times on the other side. And you can see it's already start to get the open space. And then what we need to do is collect them together. When we are taking the ink, we take it from the C, the ink on the C. Use the brush tip. So I take some ink, the black ink, and bring it back to my ink container to mix the ink. Here I have a few tips for you. There's a Chinese saying about how to hold the ink stick when we are grinding ink. That is 研墨如病夫. Literally can be translated grinding ink as we are sick. It's not means that we're only sick to grind the ink. It's to say the way we put the pressure on the surface should be very gentle. We only use the weight of our hand, and that is enough. And here's the difference before and after. And you can see this one has the matte surface. That is the one we have prepared. And this is a brand new inkstone. Another way to test it is to drop a few water. A brand new inkstone with wax or oil, the water doesn't spread. It's like a lotus leaf, the water stayed as a dew. And for the inkstone that has prepared, you can see the water start to running little bit to the side, and that means it's ready. For inkstone with a longer shape, the movement can be different. We still hold our ink stick upright. However, we can use a pushing and pull motion. If you realize you have extra ink that you couldn't use for the painting, or you simply want to grind more ink at one time and use it for the next few days, what you can do is to find a little box with a dropper and take the ink in your dropper and store them in a glass bottle so that next time you can use the ink straight away. If you don't have this little spoon, don't get stressed. There are many things you can use for this purpose. For example, if you have something like a drop, it is perfect for this purpose. Or even simple, you can use a brush by soaking the brush in the water, and the brush already able to carry water and bring it back to the inkstone. Okay, now it's time to clean up. Here are some things you may need when you are cleaning up after you grind your own ink. So for the ink stick, as you can see, this side is still damp. We have to let it dry. Some people like to use a xuan paper or even a kitchen towel to wipe the ink stick. However, I personally don't do that. So when we are wiping in this way, the fiber will be easily stuck on the surface. Next time when you are grinding ink, they may go to your ink. So instead, there are two ways to dry your ink stick. The first way is you will leave it at the side of the surface and let it air dry. Or if you have some fabric like a silk, silk is an ideal fiber for wiping out the ink stick, as the fiber is very long and smooth, so when you wipe it, it won't stick on the ink stick. However, silk can be expensive. So another material that is similar to silk is called juan, which is used for traditional wet mounting. This is also a nice surface to wipe your ink stick. It's smooth and softer. Another thing is very handy to have this fabric is, for example, when you are not using your ink stick anymore, you can just simply rub them into this fiber and put them aside for use later. And now to clean the inkstone. It's very simple and straightforward. Bring your inkstone to a running water tap and to wash the ink away. You may find it handy to have a foam like this, a soft foam, which you can use to rub the surface, the earth area and the sea area. Okay, that's after the wash. And then you can use this fabric and just wipe it clean. Wipe it dry. Okay, now it's nice and clean again. So if you are not using your inkstone for a long time, make sure you put them in the box and keep it in a nice and cool area. And if you use it every day or two, you can simply rub your inkstone in this fabric and leave it like that on your table. And that's all. That's all you need to know to start to grind your first ink. I hope you have enjoyed this process and feeling excited to start to grinding your own ink. This is a journey that once you started, it's hard to stop. So give it a try And you have any questions during the process, please feel free to leave in the comment below. Thank you, and I see you in the future. Take care.